Hey there, I'm Grace.
And I'm Amelia.
And welcome to the Women Invest in Real Estate podcast, where we talk about getting started in real estate, scaling, and we give you the inside scoop about our day-to-days as full-time investors. Have you thought about joining the community? We've created a membership for female, aspiring, and existing real estate investors. Included is a monthly masterclass from an industry expert, a monthly live Q&A with Amelia and I, and a community dashboard for networking and asking questions. Sign up at womeninvestinrealestate.com/the-community.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to episode 18 of the Women Invest in Real Estate podcast. We are super excited to talk to you today about when you can maybe start to know that it's time to go full-time in real estate investing and a couple of steps that you should take prior to quitting your full-time job.
And we're going to dive into our personal stories and when we knew it was time.
And this is a fun topic because I think we get this question pretty frequently throughout just Instagram and talking with people in real life. How did you go full-time in real estate?
Yeah. So Amelia, you want to start with like your backstory and just how you ended up being a full-time investor?
Sure. Yeah, I can give a quick little spiel. So if you don't already know, I flipped a property in 2020, at the beginning of 2020, and you can listen to our first episode where we give kind of our backstories to hear about that. But after that, I realized that I wanted to buy rental properties because I knew to replace my full-time income with rental income. I originally thought I was just going to flip, but once I was done with one flip, I was like, no, I want to buy properties that are going to supplement my income. So I bought a triplex, which cash flowed around $700 to $800 a month, which was great. And at the time, my salary was only around $50,000. So I was used to like having a pretty strict budget and living below my means. I already wasn't making a ton of money. So like I knew that to get to where I could quit my job, it wasn't really going to take that long because after taxes and everything, I think I was maybe bringing in like $3,000 a month. So it really, I mean, $700 or $800 is a pretty big chunk. And then very quickly after that, I purchased a quadplex and from the same person. And I think I was cash flowing around $1,000. So pretty quickly, I was already at $1,800 and I was completely debt free at the time. So I didn't have a car loan. I didn't have student loans. So I was really like, all I needed was what it was going to take for me to live off of. So my rent and my food. And after I got to 7 doors, I was like, okay, I'm like, it's not going to take me that much longer to be able to quit my job. And fast forward, I bought more and I was up to 15 by the summer of 2021, 15 doors. So I was a little bit below what I was making full time, but I knew that by quitting my job, I would be able to focus even more time on real estate investing. Therefore, I would be able to make even more money. So the next step, one last step before I quit was I put an 11-unit apartment under contract with partners from Idaho. And once that was said and done, I would maybe stay at the job for 30 more days and then quit. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to everybody because, you know, you could get caught up in like if you quit your full-time job, maybe you don't qualify for that lending anymore. But I was already using a commercial lender and they were, you know, I didn't make them aware that I quit. I wasn't going to go tell them, but also my partner's income at the time was enough that it still qualified us for the mortgage. Okay, so that was my backstory, just a little bit about the steps that I took. So Grace, why don't you tell us about your journey?
Yeah. So first thing I always tell people is I did not quit because I was making $1 million or because I was even making what my engineering salary was. I was far from it. I was in a different situation. I was working remotely from Iowa and I was supposed to move out to San Diego to go in person to my job. And it was one of those things where we got our first rental. It was a big BRRRR, February of 21. And we fixed it up, did really well, got maybe a couple other units. And around that time, I started to realize this real estate thing is going good. And I like doing it where I'm from and where I was born and raised. If I go to San Diego, what am I going to be able to do out there? I'm not going to be able to even buy a garage. You know, I'm picking up places for $80K in Cedar Rapids, and that just does not exist out there. So I started to think like, okay, is this cross country move really what I want to do? Or is this a good opportunity to reevaluate and maybe step out on a limb and do this real estate thing? So I kind of asked my boss, like, hey, can I maybe work permanently remotely? And they were like, no, you're a mechanical engineer. You have to come in, you're very hands-on. So I was like, shoot. And then I told them, you know what, I'm going to try this real estate thing on my own. And that was probably, my last day was August of 21, but I told them like 3 months prior because I just couldn't keep playing this game of like pretending like I was going to move out there when I really wasn't, and not knowing like, oh, next month am I going to be in Iowa or am I going to be in San Diego? So I took that opportunity, that transition to step out on a limb. It was not because I was making super good money. It was not because I had the passive income to support myself. I had to save an emergency fund to make sure that I was able to keep supporting myself while we got the real estate up and going. And actually, I think I ended up taking maybe $7,000 or $8,000 out of my 401k, which of course you have to pay taxes on, just as a feel good, like extra lump of money to live off of, which sucks. Obviously, you don't want to have to pay those taxes. But for me, it was worth it because Amelia and I always talk about you don't understand the opportunity that can come when you don't have the energy or the time to look for it while you're still working full time. But once you are able to focus on entrepreneurship full time, there are so many ways and things that you can do to make money. And Amelia and I have done about 1 million of them. So that is my story. It was, again, not because I was making so much money. It was more that I saw the opportunity and I wanted to take it. And I also had no kids, no pets. I was living very low cost of living area. I was still living like a broke college kid. So it was a lot easier for me. I always tell people I quit while it was still easy. If I would have moved out there and gotten those golden handcuffs to a high paying job in a high cost of living area, it would have been so much harder to quit, even though I might have had more passive income from my bigger real estate portfolio.
That's a great point. I think that is something that maybe people don't understand is that, yeah, both of us didn't have, I like that term, the golden handcuffs. Like we weren't like super high earners.
Yeah.
So we weren't as tied to our job as some people that are making like 200,000 and up,
right.
Which I see people that are investing that have those really high incomes and they just can't stomach quitting.
And that's like my sister, who she was making really good money at a job that was not super difficult. And she was like, I kind of enjoy it, but always had that itch of wanting to do it. And then she just, her income kept going up. So she kept being like, well, do I really need to quit? And it just, it goes to show that as you're like the golden handcuffs is really, it's definitely a thing. Like it happens.
For sure. And one other thing like Grace and I thought about before we quit was like worst case scenario for me was I just go back to work and I get another full-time job. Like,
yes.
Or I was like, I'm already making enough with my real estate. Like if I need to supplement it with something else, I could do DoorDash or I could do Uber, whatever, like Instacart or Uber. Like I could figure out ways I could get a part-time job. Like I had lots of options.
Yeah, I wrote in my journal like, okay, if I have to waitress to keep this thing going, am I okay with that? And I was like, yeah, I'm okay with that. I will waitress a few nights a week or bartend or whatever if it comes to that. And that's what I need to do to stay an entrepreneur and not have to go back to my full-time job. And like you said, Amelia, I wrote out my worst case scenario and I was like, I can deal with that. If that's the worst case, that's fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we both knew we wanted to be full-time entrepreneurs and self-employed. And then once we realized that was going to be through real estate, at least to start, we were both all in on making that happen.
Right. And one thing I want to point out is, I don't know if I said this earlier, but I think I had maybe 4 or 5 rentals when I quit. So some of the things I did off the bat to start making money was I did like a little bit of wholesaling. We had WIIRE. I had just all sorts of different things that I knew. I started doing rent to own to collect those larger down payments on some of my properties. There was just so many things that I knew I could hustle to make ends meet at the very beginning. And I'm so glad that I did that.
For sure. And I just was looking at my bank accounts the other day. This is just like a little tidbit. Like I have way more money in my bank accounts now than I ever did like when I was working a full-time job. Like I don't know that I'm necessarily even making like that much more. Like I'm definitely making more than I was, but like I don't know, like it's just so worth it to take that risk because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And one way you could look at it too is if you're nervous, if you do have a transitionary period in your life like I did, maybe you tell yourself, oh, it's a 6-month job break, or, and then at the end of the 6 months, if I'm not making X, I'll go back. And then that takes the pressure off of it and makes you feel a little bit safer. So I just am a huge believer. And if you quit, you just have no idea what opportunities are going to come your way. And it's just so freeing. Like you have one life to live. It's crazy. Like I'm like, everyone should quit their jobs, but obviously it's not smart for everybody.
Yeah. And everybody doesn't want to quit their jobs too, which
Yes,
blows
that's a
my
good
mind.
point.
But
And I agree with that because I feel like some people push the quit your job narrative, which I try not to, even though I just said everybody should. Because if you like your job and, you've got a big family you're supporting, then don't feel like you need to cave to the pressure of social media saying that you should quit your job. Definitely stick with it if it makes you happy. And some people aren't cut out for the stress of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, definitely. That's one other thing. Like Grace and I don't know about Grace, but like I said, I'm making like probably a little bit like probably 20 to 30%, maybe 50% more than I was making when I was working a full-time job. But I've been able to travel and just have so much freedom that it is so worth it. Like I've gone on like, I don't know, 7 or 8 vacations this year. Like that to me is my why for being in real estate too. So it's fun to like actually fulfill your why.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Okay.
I would love to, when you were saying you make 20 to 30% more than your W-2, for me, I was thinking about it the other day. And because I have so many different ways that I make money here and there, and then the real estate business, just because my real estate makes a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean that I take it, that I reinvest a lot of it. But I was thinking that I think 2022, I will have made just as much as my engineering salary, maybe a little bit more. So I'll be very curious to put those numbers together at the end of the year, which is super exciting.
Yeah, that's really exciting. We're both kind of like finance nerds a little bit, like we like the numbers and stuff. So yeah, I need to sit down and actually figure that out too. I mean, we obviously are paying way more in taxes. Well, we could be paying way more in taxes being self-employed, but we'll just have to see at the end of the year where we end up.
And we'll report that. Okay. I have a question for you, Amelia. This is something that I have not had to deal with, but I know you get this question all the time. So what did insurance look like for you when you quit? Because you were over the age of 26, staying on your parents' insurance was not an option.
Yeah. Oh my God. This is the most commonly asked question when people are wondering about how I quit my job or how they can quit their jobs. And it's really not that scary and it's not that hard as you might think. And maybe that's because I am a single person and I only had to get insurance for myself. I don't have a family on there, but basically all I did was I got on the government marketplace. There's Google government marketplace insurance and you'll find it. And basically just compare different plans there. They have like questionnaires that you go through that states like what kind of coverage you're looking for, what medications you're on, if any, that would need to be covered. And then it actually like lists out all the plans that you can choose from and even has comparables. If this plan offers X, then it has an X here. If this plan doesn't offer X, it doesn't have a check mark. So it shows the differences between the plans. And you literally just pick one of the plans and the start date, and that's it. And I would say right now I'm paying, God, I think it's $165 for my health and like $20 for dental. And I don't have eye insurance, whatever that's called, never have, because I don't wear contacts or glasses. Knock on wood, hopefully I never have to, but yeah, so it's like $200 a month. And that's definitely, I think the premiums I was paying at my full-time job, I was maybe paying $100 a month. So it's a little bit more. And I think my deductible's a little bit higher, but I'm young and healthy. So like, I'm not super worried about it. Truthfully, to have to pay $100 more than I was paying at a full-time job is
worth it.
so worth it to me.
Yeah. And I do think we should point out, we both have the benefit of being, young and healthy and not any severe health problems or health problems at all, really, again, knock on wood. Yeah. So insurance was probably easier than some people who might have conditions or health problems. But yeah, I think that's really helpful, Amelia, to share how you found it.
Yep, that's just speaking from my personal experience. Just do a little bit of research and figure out what your premium might be so then you can factor that into your budget if you are going to be self-employed. Which another great step, which Grace, you should chit chat about, is how do you get lending when you're self-employed?
So short answer is commercial loans. The long answer is to establish relationships with small local banks, which is exactly what it sounds like, and have those relationships, have a few completed projects under your belt before you quit your job so that you're able to continue to take loans and the bank is able to continue to lend to you without having to fill out application on application. I don't know if you saw this, Amelia, but our friend Melinda just posted on her Instagram story that she got $1.7 million in funding with no applications. And she said the answer was relationships. That's exactly true. It is all about establishing good relationships before you quit your job. And then the second part of that is that commercial lending does not go off of your W-2. It goes off of what's called debt service coverage ratio. So basically my lender wants to know, I think it's like 1.2. So if the debt is, or maybe it's 1.3, I honestly don't know, but I'm not getting deals that are anywhere close to their minimum. So I know I'm always in the clear, but let's say it's 1.3. So if the debt's 1,000, it needs to rent for 1,300. And that is what they lend to you on. So I'm at the point where I email my banker, hey, can you give me a loan on this property? And she replies, what's the rent? And I say this, and she's like, yep, got the paperwork going. And that's because we started with her and we stuck with her and we did multiple loans while I still had my job.
Yeah, I will say some small banks even do still require you to show income, even if they are a commercial DSCR lender, but they don't put as much weight on it. Mine still require me every year to give them my tax return and everything like that. And they still kind of take that into account, but they're not like as focused on it. So it's not that they don't look at it at all. They're just not as they're not focused on it as much.
Yeah, I should clarify. The first loan, I gave them all that info. They saw my W-2, my tax returns. But after that, it became, once we built that rapport and that relationship and that trust, they don't ask for those anymore.
Yeah. I think one of the issues that I ran into was one of my lenders, I hit their maximum lending amount in a short period of time. It was like $1 million that I had with them. And so they basically put a hold on my lending at that point for like a year. And so I had to find another lender. So I just went and found another local community. It was a credit union, a small local credit union, and went through the same process with them. So now I basically have two lenders that are willing to work with me because the original lender is trying to give me money again.
That's great.
But I actually get better rates from the second lender. So I'm kind of like, oh, screw you guys. At least for now. If I need money in the future,
screw you until I need money.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's funny.
Okay, so let's talk about like just our personal like budget and finances. Like what advice would you give to somebody that's looking to quit their job?
I would say make sure that you are personally debt free. I paid my way through college. I had no car loan, no credit card debt. I did have a mortgage, but it was a very I had my boyfriend and my sister living with me and we each paid like $400. It was crazy. But yeah, just make sure that you understand your own budget, because if you don't understand your own budget, how are you going to go manage a budget on $100,000 rehab or whatever it is you take on? Like that's just you're building on very poor foundation.
Exactly. And if you don't know how much you're spending every month, if you don't have it lined out before you quit your job,
you won't know your runway.
Yeah, you might think you have a good idea, but if you don't spend like a couple months like actually tracking it, like either through an app or writing it down or using Excel, you might be shocked at how much you're eating out at Jimmy John's every month. Yeah. I know I certainly was and am still, but I track my spending every single month still. But it's shocking when you actually sit down and look at what you're spending every month.
I tracked my spending for starting my senior year of college for probably 2 solid years. Then when I became self-employed, I stopped doing it for a little bit because I didn't know how to divvy up non non-reoccurring income. And then now I started doing it again and I use every dollar. So I highly recommend that. I should never have stopped, but I definitely use every dollar. What do you use, Amelia?
I just use an a Google Excel doc or whatever, and manually track it every month. Although I have been looking into an app because it would just make it so much easier to link my credit card and be able to categorize that way. But one last thing I want to say about like budgeting and stuff is that, and I think Grace touched on this earlier, you should have a pretty hefty savings. You should have like 3 to 6 months in personal savings. I don't know that necessarily even includes like the savings that you have for your properties. Like that's just
that's separate.
Yeah. I mean, it can take some hard work to get to the point where you're ready to quit, but I wouldn't recommend like prematurely quitting before you have some of those financial obstacles in order.
Yeah. So for me, when I knew my end date, like I said, I was tracking every dollar. I was siphoning off a large portion of my paycheck for the 3-4 months leading up to that to add to my emergency fund. I already had an emergency fund, but once I knew I was going to quit, I was really beefing it up, and to where I knew the day that I quit, I'm going to have this much in my emergency fund, and this is how many months that should last me.
Yep, exactly. And I think mine was like on the lower end. I think mine was about 3 months, but I've been beefing it up as I've been growing. So I think I have about 6 months in savings at this point, just for me personally. And I feel comfortable with that because I know like if I run out of that money, I have access to credit cards, which should be an absolute last resort. But like if I need it, I have access to money.
Any last tips we should give for somebody who's thinking about quitting their job?
I would say the last one is just like the opportunity cost of you living or of you being in your full-time job. Like you're spending at least 40 hours a week most of the time on your full-time job. And that's 40 hours less that you can spend on real estate.
Yeah. Like I've said 3 times already, you have no idea what opportunity is out there because you just don't have the resources to look for that opportunity while you're still working your full-time job.
Exactly. So that's what I would say. Just don't forget that there is some opportunity cost with you still being in a full-time job, and you have the ability to make even more in real estate if you can focus full-time on that instead.
But at the same time, I do want to wrap it up by saying, don't make a terrible decision. Make sure that you are in a good space financially, mentally to do this. And if you are somebody who genuinely enjoys their job, don't be in a rush to quit it.
Exactly. Yeah. It worked for me and Grace because that's just who we are. But if it's not for you, it's not for you. Like, don't try to force it. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you loved today's episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to check us out and join our community at womeninvestinrealestate.com and follow us on Instagram at WIIRE with 2 eyes.community.